Well, howdy YouTube family. It's Bolt CRNA coming to you again with another day's topic. So today we're going to be talking about 5 things I wish I knew before I became a nurse anesthetist or a CRNA. Let's get into it. Time to rearrange this camera. All right, the first thing that I wish that I knew more about is the schedule. Now, before I get into any more of this, let me stop for a moment and say none of these things would change my mind about being a CRNA. None of these factors would make me personally decide I don't want to be a CRNA. I wish I hadn't done this. So let me preface all of that by saying this. These are 5 things that I did not have a clear idea about before I got started into CRNA school. And I think a lot of students don't know all these details before they get started. And maybe some of these details might be deciding factors for you that might actually change if you wanted to be a CRNA. So I'm gonna give these to you now, but that's my preface. I don't regret being a CRNA. I love it, I think it's wonderful. But these are 5 things that I did not know that I wish I probably should have known more. As I was saying, the schedule, number 1. The schedule, I get questions about this all the time on Instagram. Shameless plug, go follow me on Bolt CRNA at Instagram. I do a lot of stories over there, daily posts, a lot of stuff about my daily life, maybe doing anesthesia and things like that. So people ask me oftentimes over there like, hey, what's your schedule like? Because it seems like you were up all night last night and then you're trying to recover today, and then you're going to be back at work first thing tomorrow morning, and then you're working on a Saturday. And so my schedule from people who follow me on Instagram are like, what's up? You know, your schedule doesn't look great. And the truth is, the schedule as an anesthesia provider is not a lifestyle type schedule. You can, in certain groups, be able to find a schedule where it is like dedicated set hours. Say you want to work 4 10s a week and you don't want to take any call and you don't want to work any weekends. There are certain groups you can find that in, but they're usually very large groups. And they're usually groups that somebody is taking the call and somebody's working the weekends in those groups. And you can bet if you're not having to take any of the call or the weekends and that other group of people are doing it, they're making more money than you are. You're taking a pay cut because you're getting all that stuff, you know, out of your way and not having to do it. And you're probably taking a cut in your autonomy and in practice in that setting, because usually in those settings, you're restricted autonomy because the people who are taking all the calls on the nights and the weekends, you know, they hold all the power and they choose to not give you autonomy. So that's your trade-off if you choose to find a group like that. To me, it's definitely not worth it to trade off my autonomy and my professional practice for that kind of, and pay for that kind of schedule. So in general in anesthesia, you're gonna work rotating schedules where you will have to do some night call, you will have to do some weekends, you are gonna have to, you know, work longer days sometimes. You're not gonna have exact set schedules, which also means you may be working more than 40 hours in a week. Maybe one week you end up being lucky and working 35 hours. Not likely, but maybe. There may be another week you're working 50 hours. It just depends. And it also depends on the size of your group. So what if somebody's out on maternity leave? What if somebody fell and broke their ankle yesterday and they can't come in? It's not like nursing where there's just, oh, you'll just pull another RN from another floor and they'll just cover you and you'll make it work or whatever. It doesn't work like that in anesthesia. There's very limited people who are, you've gone to an education level and a licensure and a practice level where you can't just grab and plug and play other people who can do your job. There's just a very limited set number of you, and that set number, if one of you falls off, there may not be anybody else to replace that person. So that means you will replace that person by picking up their extra shifts and their extra hours. And I mean, there's no other choice. Other than that, I mean, surgeries would have to be canceled. People can't have emergency surgeries done. There's just things that work out so that it's just impossible for you to say, I'm not gonna help out and I'm not gonna take those person's shifts. So yeah, you'll be working longer weeks sometimes. Things come up in anesthesia. And that's something a lot of people just don't quite realize. The schedule is not as cushy and not as great as you think it is. My second big thing I didn't quite fully grasp that I wished I had known more about was the politics in anesthesia. So this is something that I had a general idea about as a nurse. You kind of have an idea when you're an RN in the ICU, like, okay, nurse practitioners and physicians and CRNAs, maybe there's a little bit of turf war between them, but you don't think it's much of a deal. When you get into actually training, you have a professional aspects course that's a requirement for your doctoral education, and you start learning more education on the background and the history of anesthesia, and you start realizing, CRNAs have been around since the Civil War, and they actually were the very first anesthesia provider before physician anesthesiologists came along in the 1930s. And ever since then, about that time in the early 1930s, both CRNAs and physician anesthesiologists created their own professional organizations nationally, and ever since then they've been at war with each other pretty much. They've never been able to get along fully. There's always been politics involving money and power and egos and control, and that's always been a warring thing, and it's been pretty ugly for the last 100 years. And it doesn't look like it's changing anytime soon. It's only been escalating probably since the 80s in kind of toxicity. So that's a major issue. I mean, you're talking about anesthesia assistants and or anesthesiologist assistants, AAs, and how they're allowed to practice in like 14 of the states, and they're designed in the 1960s by anesthesiologists to replace CRNAs. That's a major political factor that you don't realize when you're applying for CRNA school, is that there is competition in the field, and that people can play ugly and will straight up try and destroy your future practice if they can. So as a CRNA, as a group, all 50,000+ of you in the US, I mean, we donate millions of dollars each year to lobbying for political legislative actions so that we can just protect our practice and continue to practice into the future. And we're in a really great place right now, but it's just something that you have to keep up with. You have to constantly keep educated on. You have to keep up with the politics of what's going on nationally, and make sure that there are not laws being passed that mean you can't practice to your full extent of your training and licensure, or laws that say you can't practice at all, maybe. So yes, that's something that a lot of people don't know fully about, and that's something I didn't have a full grasp on before I got started. The third thing that I wish that I had knew a little more about before I got into CRNA school is that your practice, your daily practice, can change as a CRNA from hospital to hospital. This is due to the medical culture at that hospital and that facility. You think when you're going to school and you're getting training for something, that when you get out of school, you'll be licensed and trained to do the tasks that you're licensed and trained to do. And you assume that's as simple as it is. The state licenses you and you're trained to do something, so therefore you'll do that thing. But the reality is, depending on which hospital you're working at, the medical culture at that hospital, they will make up bylaws and rules specific to their facility that could easily restrict you from doing things that you're trained and licensed to do, and suddenly your practice is maybe half of what you should be doing. And so that can affect your skills. It can affect your autonomy and your ability in doing your job every day. You go in and you feel like you're not able to perform your fullest anesthetic for your patients because you're only doing half of what you were trained to do. That's something that I didn't quite understand when I was in school, is when I get out and I choose different hospitals to work for, even if I can go to one hospital on this road in this state and I can do everything that I'm trained to do and licensed to do, and I can have total autonomy and feel great about my practice and be able to deliver the highest quality, safest anesthetic for my patients, and go home feeling fulfilled and like I'm doing what I've trained to do. And then you can leave that position and go a mile down the road to another hospital, and you might be told you can't do this, 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 and this. Someone else needs to do this for you, just for arbitrary reasons that facility chose that they were going to restrict you on those aspects. So that's something as a CRNA you just have to keep your eye out for. I would say in general, things are not nearly as negative as they used to be. And in general, most hospitals across the nation have been opening up more and more and more, and their medical cultures have been adapting a more inclusive model for CRNA so that they do allow practice of all aspects of your anesthetics, and it's the most cost-effective and economic way to perform anesthesia. So most hospitals have gone to that method so they can, stay afloat and keep their doors open and provide for their communities. So in that sense, it's positive for CRNAs, but it is something you have to be aware of. The fourth thing that I wish that I had more information about, that I kind of had a better grasp about, is the stress and responsibility of being an anesthesia provider. This is something, in the ICU, a lot of you guys watch this channel are already ICU nurses. I was, to be a CRNA, you have to be an ICU nurse first. So of course you understand stress, you understand anxiety, you understand criticalness of patients. You've been dealing with lots of machines and critical patients for years now. So there is stress and anxiety with your current position as an ICU nurse, but there is a much higher level of stress that you enter into when you start your training in anesthesia and you start being taught and understanding the idea of you're broken out of the nursey mentality of like you're here to give care and you're here to assist and you're here to like enact orders and you're here to make sure the patient is safe and taken care of. And even in the ICU, you have that mentality, but it's more of at a critical level. But still, that's your ultimate idea and mentality is you're not the top person responsible for everything on that patient. There's someone else, if you get stumped, who can help you. When you go to CRNA school, you're taught like you're going to be licensed to be fully responsible for that patient. Anything that happens to that patient is your responsibility. And if something goes strange with the EKG, if a medication reaction happens, if the surgeon nicks the aorta by accident, whatever happens in surgery or in the perioperative period, you're completely and legally responsible for, and you need to have the answers to fix that. You need to know what to do. You need to have resources. And in some practice models, there's big groups and there's different other people there who have experience in other areas who can help you and, facilitate getting things done in trauma moments to help you. But that doesn't absolve you of your responsibility at all. And also, you have to remember that when you're licensed as a CRNA, you're a fully independent licensed provider. So you could easily be working in a hospital where it's just you there alone all day or all night. You could be doing completely solo anesthesia, and you are completely responsible for everything. Everything that happens to that patient in surgery is your responsibility. The surgeon is responsible for the surgical procedure that they're performing on the patient, but they're not responsible for what's happening with the lungs and the heart and the circulatory system and the nervous system and the brain. Everything else that's going on in that body during surgery, that's all you. That's all your responsibility. Blood products, everything. Canceling a case. That's another thing you don't quite realize is the perioperative period, pre-op, when you're assessing a patient and they're coming in and they're telling you like they can walk up one flight of stairs, but they really can't walk up 2 flights of stairs, and they smoke 2 packs per day, and they don't ever have chest pain, but occasionally they get something that feels like acid reflux, and their EKG looks okay, but a little bit off. And it's a gray area. It's a judgment call. It's like, is this a patient appropriate? Do I need to cancel this surgery? Like those types of situations come up in anesthesia, and you're fully responsible for if you say it's okay to go for surgery and you're getting pressure from the surgeon and everybody else to like say it's okay and to go forward, and you go forward with it, you are now fully responsible for anything that happens to that patient under anesthesia. So that the full gravity and reality of that, I would say that it's even as a student, you don't quite realize it because you always have someone else around who's a licensed provider who's like really responsible ultimately for that case. But once you get out of school and you're on your own and you're practicing underneath your own license, it fully kind of sets in with you in situations that like you are very responsible for everything here. And that's a big weight. So it's very important, a high level of responsibility, and I think people should have a better grasp of what that really is like. And caveat, that's also why we get paid very well. That level of responsibility and stress, it comes at a premium. And trust me, the gray hairs are coming in already. The 5th thing that I wished I had a better idea about, or maybe not delusion about, is that how difficult CRNA school would be. I knew CRNA school would be hard. Everyone knows it's hard. You have to be a fool to not just Google online, CRNA school and not come up with a ton of information that shows you people say it's hard. But I think a lot of type A students who are applying to CRNA school, they're the people who are kind of the top ICU nurses in their crew. They're used to being the top maybe nursing students in undergrad. They're used to things flowing easily for them. They're used to studying and getting things quickly. And that's typically the students you'll see applying to CRNA school. So with that comes a sense of a little bit of arrogance, maybe because they just never have been fully challenged to the level that they're about to get challenged. And I'd say that I was in that same boat where you're like, sure, it's hard. Lots of stuff out there is hard, but I can handle it. There's never been anything I haven't been able to handle fairly easily before. So, they'll throw this at me. It'll be tricky. It'll take some time, but it'll be okay. It won't be that bad for me. You start your first month or so, and it's like a 10-pound brick smacks you over the head because you're like, this is next level kind of difficulty, and part of it is just the speed at which they move. They're covering material that when you took A&P in undergrad for nursing school, you would have spent like 4 weeks covering this amount of material, and they're covering it in like a lecture in 1 day. And they're going much more in depth to like a microcellular level, and the test on it is next week. And so that's just the pace at what you're moving. And then you have a class after that class where they're covering things at that same pace as well. And you have like 5 or 6 classes, and they're all covering things at that pace, and the test is all next week on all of it. And it's just constant compounding difficulty to keep up with that and to constantly keep building, and not just memorizing information like you're used to doing from undergrad, but actually mastering and understanding and synthesizing the information and understanding how to implement it in a clinical situation where, you know, emergencies may be happening and you need to be able to recall this information and how to, you know, use it in the setting. That's very difficult, very stressful. And the other aspect that's so hard about CRNA school is there's no stopping. There's no break. There's no time. There's no summer off. There's no option to take a semester off. There's no option to fail a class and just come back and retake it next year. It's all full speed ahead. If you can't keep up, you're out the door, no questions asked, see you later, go choose a different career. And it's that way for 3 solid years nonstop, full 36 months, 3 years. So yes, that is an aspect of CRNA school that's extremely difficult. I didn't fully understand that. I don't know that anyone can truly grasp it until you're in the midst of it and experiencing it. But I wish that there was some way someone could have downloaded that to me so I had a little better understanding. Well, all right, guys, that was my 5 things that I felt like I wish I knew before I went to CRNA school or became a CRNA. I want to hear down below from some of you guys. I know a lot of you guys are applying to CRNA school or maybe are in CRNA school now. I want to know what things you wish you knew before you got started, because share with the other people out there. Let this be kind of a mind share situation where everyone can learn from each other, because I'm sure there's things I didn't mention that you guys know about. Also, make sure and hit that like button, or smash that like button as they say on YouTube. Pound that like button. Explode that like button. That means a lot to me. It helps the YouTube algorithm. If you don't hit the like button, YouTube doesn't suggest the video to other people who are trying to get into CRNA school. So it's important to hit it. Also subscribe if you like this video, because I always put out videos every Monday, or usually every Monday. So more videos coming in the future like this. If you're interested in getting into CRNA school and want a mock interview, or you just want the study guide that I have that prepares you for the interview for CRNA school, go over to the membership tab over here on YouTube and join the membership, and you'll have access to all that stuff. And till next time, let's bolt out.